welcome, and we're very happy seeing you today. In our panel, we will be discussing the convergence through AI and in AI and technology, which is basically in today's world you can't do anything without AI, as we know. So hopefully, we will be discussing it in many different dimensions. From the pharma perspective, we have distinguished panelists. From technology provider perspective, from digital health companies perspective. Obviously, we would like to make it as engaging as possible in today's session. We have also a small, I would say, a short poll that we would like to run before the panel and after the panel. So hopefully it will be engaging. Just to kick off with brief introductions about myself, Cem Baydar. I'm currently serving on the boards of several startups, scale-ups, VCs, and PEs, both on digital health and biotech areas. Spent the last 25 years as strategy consultant. Now I am doing this independently. My co-chair, Ulrich, is here as well. Ulrich, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Can you hear me? Good morning. Yeah, pleasure to be here on stage, also to share the session with Cem. Also looking very much forward to discussing with the esteemed panel. Briefly about myself, Ulrich Muehlner, co-founder and CEO of docdok.health, a digital health company at the interface of healthcare professionals and patients. Previously with Novartis, in leading roles like head of corporate strategy, head of tech partnering globally, before with BCG. While we do the introduction of the panelists, I invite you to participate in the poll. I think it's the first time ever, as far as I know, that we do this at the SAX conference. So it's really high-tech at the high-tech conference. So please, I would really like to pick your brains where you stand. But with that, I hand over for the introduction.
Thank you. I'm Antonio Gatti from Microsoft. I'm a managing director in our healthcare and life sciences division. My role is mostly focused on creating the convergence, or let's say advising customer on the convergence between technology and, of course, which are our business outcomes across the different areas of the pharma value chain, and looking also, of course, at the healthcare provider and so on and so forth. Being 10 years at Microsoft, I'm not a pure life sciences because I've worked on multiple industries in my career, so I try to mix different perspectives in order to create a good convergence from that point of view.
Hello, Harry, thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Chen Liu. I'm originally from China. I have been in Germany for 23 years. So what I do is policy strategy for governments and life science companies, and advise, for example, German Federal Ministry of Health and the collaboration in digital health policy with China back in 2019. And we also help to have a better patient access subsidy by the government. The last example I can mention was 2024, the inclusion of COPD in China for the basic healthcare program for the population with the lung diseases. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. A little bit of a background. My name is Farnaz, PhD in biomedical, a few years in management consultancy, BCG McKinsey, and I'm the head of pharma at Huma. The scope of my role is mainly leading the commercial strategy, BD, and ensuring that we maintain our relation and partnership with our pharma and healthcare partners. I look forward to our panel, which will be quite exciting.
Hello, good morning, and thank you for the invitation for being here today. My name is Jorge Cancela. I'm with Roche, based here in Basel. And I'm digital health leader. And basically what I do is I work together with internal teams to explore opportunities where we can embed health tech technologies into the different parts of the value chain for our company, from commercial to R&D. Most recently, I'm leading a team like that is focused on AI for medical imaging assessment in clinical trials. Yeah, and we cover everything, like from developing like the business case and further explore that opportunity and make sure that it makes sense. There is a good rationale for that, up to the development if needed, or partnerships, and then deployment and implementation. So thank you for being here and looking forward to the discussion.
And then lastly, hi everybody, Philipp Steitz my name, very nice to meet you all. Part of Merck KGA, our team is the digital health team. So we support, augment, and improve our drug offerings by digital means, being both from clinical trials, so using, for example, digital biomarkers to improve readouts of drugs, all the way up to commercial, similar to my colleague, using, for example, smart injection devices to predict and improve adherence. Previously in a number of consultancy companies and startups, and also very much looking forward to this panel.
Thank you. And just a quick reminder for the people who just joined us. There is an interesting poll here that we are trying the first time. So we encourage you to join and sort of, to participate. Hopefully it will be an exciting exercise for all of us. Because what we were going to be doing is that after the panel, we will be running this again and see how much difference that we've had based on the discussions in the panel. So with that said, let's open the discussion. And AI, right? Hype versus reality. I think, we are a bit divided, maybe 50-50%, who knows, but everybody is thinking about this. So maybe I can open the floor with a question to the panelists. So in your perspectives, where does AI have today and in 5 years? So if you think about 5 years, not sort of longer time period, the biggest impact along pharma value / process chain. So if you look at the pharma value chain from R&D, manufacturing, supply, commercialization, patient engagement, and so on and so forth. What are your thoughts about it? What are your perspectives about where would be the most impact from AI in the next 5 years? Maybe I can start with Antonio, since he's looking at me.
Absolutely. Let me be the icebreaker here. So Sam, I think there are two questions here, right? One is on AI hype versus reality, and the other one is on the impact. So let me first do a quick check, with the audience also on hype versus reality. Given that, here we are all, let's say, professional in the health sector in the end. So how many of you have used ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity or any other GenAI tool in the last month? How many in the last week? So it's real. So it's not a joke, it's real in the end, no? So it's something that we are using, and it's real at least from the perspective of the adopter, for the perspective of the user. Now, how do we make real, let's say, from an enterprise perspective on how we create basically the impact on the different areas of the value chain? So I think that, and this is something where with Microsoft also we are putting a lot of investments. At the moment, it's still not clear what is the platform that it will sustain the different use cases and the different applications and the different things across the value chain and across the areas. It's not clear what is the platform. And I'm not talking of a technological platform. I like to make an example, which is a very, let's say, concrete example from this point of view. If you think to electricity, and if you think, let's say, to the first power plant that was basically put on the market, it was 1882. Thomas Edison put the first power plant offering electricity to home and businesses. So from 1882 to 1913, and I will tell you why 1913, basically, that kind of innovation, the electricity, the power plant, the fact that you got electricity in your business was basically allowing a kind of 9% or 8% productivity, labor productivity growth rate year over year. So that kind of annual growth rate was around 8%, something like that, in 30 years from 1882 to 1913. Why 1913? Because in 1913, maybe someone knows, that Henry Ford introduced the assembly line in the manufacturing space, in the automotive space, and introduced the assembly line, and they started the operation, let's say, through the assembly line. And in the next 10 years, after the introduction of the assembly line, the labor productivity increased by 25%. So what is the point? No, we are living this moment in which AI is that kind of technological innovation, which is similar to electricity, which is similar to the internet, which is similar to many of the things that we experienced across the last couple of centuries. And what is important, as it was important for electricity and the labor productivity, is the platform, the mindset, the fact that you have something where you can put AI at work. So I don't know exactly where the biggest impact will be. I think that the biggest impact will be more across the organization that will enable then the different use cases, let's say in the AI, in the R&D space, in the manufacturing space, in the commercial space. But what is important to look at in the next 5 years is what is the assembly line innovation, like for electricity, that we have for AI, which is not clear yet. So how do we put AI at work from that point of view, and scale projects, let's say, in a way that they deliver in the end outcomes?
Thank you, Antonio. Before I hand over to the next panelist to build on that, just want to refer to the first results, fresh from the poll. Interestingly, I looked at it, and we started with 100% skeptics. And while you were talking, Antonio, you kind of convinced already people shifting from the skeptics to the maybe there is some value. So maybe I'm not sure it was your speech, but at least so first of all, thanks for participating. But I would really like the other panelists to build on Antonio's statement, also from their perspective, provide some insights where you see maybe already today AI at works within the organization or organizations you work with. So feel free to take it from here.
So I think, thank you for the historical comparison. I think it's very interesting to really understand. It's not only a technology, right? It's a behavior. And I also reflect, because in the last panel, when I asked what is one word to be remembered, and Kurt said outcome. And I think this is also key for this panel, which is, I think, of course, we are respecting the technologies coming, evolving. And I think a lot of things we see in AI is also around AI drug discovery. And but I think, the AI can really add value when technology with the regulation, but also execution converge. And I think it's very important, the work we have been doing is very much on policy focus. So we make sure that at the end of the day, we can really improve the access, and also to encourage the government support in the technology-enabled time. So I think what does it mean in very concrete is how can we understand the policy changes that influence also the technology usage, because at the end of the day, we have to understand, what is the technology access, right? Who benefits, and what does it mean for my daily operations, right? And right now we know that there's a lot of things happening, both when it comes to regulation and AI, in European Union, but also we have a huge pressure from, United States when it comes to the pricing, right? So and the question becomes how the technology can help me to make a better judgment, prediction of the likelihood of which policy changes affect my daily operations, daily sales, and launch timing. And this is something that I think is very important to engage policy-related leaders. Just one example from the presentation by An and the last about the initiatives. What I learned, when it comes to concrete example happening in China is that we oftentimes underestimate the speed and the willingness how governments operate. And if the cases are presented very clearly and the interest for the population health is very clear, very imminent. They move fast. They move fast. Even for national initiatives, it can happen within 20, 18 months. When the law becomes reality. Of course, China is a different system. We know it's not democracy, but I think it's also very important to understand the implication for the different assets coming from China. Either it's a biotech, either it's a clinical trial. So I think this is something we really can look at it, and AI plays a big role to make sure that models can also, multiply in other regions.
Thank you. Before we maybe go again into this regulation topic, would like to maybe step back or go back again to the original question to talk about like today or in the next 5 years along the value chain. And Vanas and Jorge and Philip, maybe from your perspective, working with patients, working within or with pharma, what is your status today, your experience, but also a little bit look in the future. Where is it working? Where will it be working soon?
Perfect. So I'm just going to give a bit of a context about our company and then address your question. We're a digital AI health solution company called Huma. We've been around for about 13 years. We started, by the time we started, there was no AI, or probably it was the early stages in lab and research. But we started entering this space by offering simply remote patient monitoring. So again, a little bit of history is that this was, the first evolution of introducing digital into the healthcare and life sciences ecosystem. And we just enabled the remote patient monitoring in the UK through rare disease patients. And then eventually, over the course of time, we expanded that. We offer regulated companion app solutions, software as a medical device. And fast forward to date, we're the only digital AI health solution company that enables a pharma enterprise, a hospital, 2 entrepreneurs in a garage to be able to roll out a regulated healthcare software in a matter of days. Now, we were talking about policies. In this space, in order to roll out a regulated software, it will usually take you a year and a half. You have to do it per disease area, therapeutic area. You have to do it per region, depending on the age range of the patients. But what we have tried to introduce, and which is quite revolutionary, is that we bring that pace into market. We enable the end users and the consumers to be able to roll out a regulated solution and bring it to the hands of the patient. Now, when we see it among our clients, we mainly work with the top 20 pharma companies, and we support more than 5,000 hospitals globally. So we have a global footprint today. What we see is that a lot of our partners, yes, they're adopting AI and digital, whether it's within their commercial part of the value chain, whether it's within their clinical trials, which is on the R&D side, they're adopting it. But the level of adoption or the level of maturity varies. Some of them are early on because they have to develop the proof of concept. They have to build, and we together try to build the return of investment for each use case that they're trying to implement and deploy. But some of them are quite advanced, and we call them our mature partners, or partners that we start engaging with them, that they have already seen the value creation and the potential outcomes. But to your point on where do we see AI, of course it's a hype, but the pharma, the way they're adopting it, it will actually convert it and translate it into a reality. Because what they're trying to do is to understand when they're adopting this AI, whether it's a predictive preventive algorithm, whether it's about predicting exacerbations for certain patients, which I can touch on the use cases as we go along, but they want to build the use case and kind of understand what KPIs they can touch on. And because they're taking the approach of developing that return of investment, I think it is becoming more practical as opposed to having that hype. But we do see it across the value chain, and we believe that it not only helps helping with patient adherence, increasing patient patient advocacy, and also helping pharma and healthcare drive further insight from the real-world evidence that they're generating. But we also do see that a lot of the processes that exist within pharma and hospital and healthcare, we will be able to automate that to a significant extent. So the healthcare providers which are in this industry can focus on things that would help them be more effective and tasks that will help them be more effective. But yes, this is just a general overview, and we will deep dive into the different use cases as we discuss.
So I think that it's always healthy for especially the people that we are tech enthusiasts like me, to be careful with the technology and to don't get too excited about like the hype and the potential. Absolutely agree with that. But I think in this case, we can already see that AI is having an impact in all the different steps of the value chain, at least on the pharma industry. Probably what we are not having yet is like that big headline that says AI has transformed, disrupt this industry. I don't see that. I think that that's going to be very hard to happen, or that we see that. But what we can see is that every day we are already using AI to some extent to solve small, tiny steps of that process. And that's happening today, all the way, right? So we have things like, technology to generate like a draft of a new protocol based on previous protocols of clinical trials, right? We can see the same to report the results of a study. And before you have to have like a medical writer, have like a contract set up like that, an agency to help you with that. Now you can draft that automatically. And even like more critical steps, critical meaning those that require like more rigor in the validation or the evidence that you need to generate, or the quality, like to analyze medical images to extract like digital biomarkers that could become like an endpoint for your clinical trial. We can even think on those kind of things today, right? So there are these small things that are already happening. And for that reason, I think like, for example, the study that is mentioned here, like, I think it's interesting, but the way that they look at the impact, which at the end, I think they are absolutely right, is like on the P&L of the company, which makes absolutely sense. To some extent, we need to be able to make that connection with everything that we do. But because we are talking about like these small steps, I think it's also like very hard to make that connection in some cases, right? Like, so if you're able to generate like a draft of a protocol in minutes instead of having to wait weeks, how that impacts like the P&L of the company, right? Are you going to generate more protocols? I mean, no. I mean, you need one protocol. You don't need like 100 protocols. So what does it mean? How do you measure like that return of investment? It's not straightforward. It doesn't mean that it's not happening. It's happening. But to go to that extent of being able to measure like the impact on the P&L, I think is hard. And then the second aspect, I think, is that hand in hand with the technology adoption, it comes also like the change management, right? So how do you, one thing that you start using these tools, like, okay, let's see what happened. Others, like, you are actually able to change how you operate based on this. And that requires like a different level of risk that I don't think that we are there yet. Maybe when that happens is when we start having like those big headlines about AI. But I will say that for the moment is, again, being very cautious about what I'm about to say. I don't think it's a hype. I think it's happening, but we do not have like that, moonshot, like that big headline. Philip.
I think you made a very good point about connecting these small impacts with, for example, in the paper, with top or bottom line impact. To me, when I think about it, it's a bit like, for example, and I'm very happy that we have our colleague from Microsoft, like Microsoft Teams or Outlook, right? Would you say that each and every Teams message actually generates an impact, a return? I would very much argue not so from my everyday life. But does it generate a huge impact to have these systems as a whole and utilize them? I guess all of us can agree, yes. So to me, it's very similar. I think, especially at the moment, we focus a lot too much on, for example, as in the study, on top and bottom line impact, instead of looking at, do these solutions actually cover a patient need? Do they fit very well into the HCP workflows and not make their life more difficult by, for example, having to fact check everything? So to me, it's really about, at the moment, focusing more on a different kind of impact than what is stated in the study. And I think one thing to have in mind thinking about this is how incredibly slow pharma and healthcare market is. To my understanding, or in my opinion, we do have these really big AI impacts, such as AlphaFold. I mean, it won a Nobel Prize, right? It's an incredible technology transforming how we approach research and development, how we approach discovery. But pharma is slow, so it will take 5-10 years at least for molecules that were developed using this AI to hit the market. So that to me also fuels into this aspect of course, these things can't have top or bottom line impact at the moment because they can't hit the market at this point. And the same agrees to solutions that are in the commercial space, such as, for example, with humor. I'm pretty sure there are some solutions that can already generate returns. But also here we're talking about a slow market. Regulations need to catch up, HCPs need to be trained, need to be convinced of the solution, and patients need to have trust in the solutions. So again, just taking time. And I think if we would now focus on just top and bottom line impact, we would need to kill a lot of solutions that will make huge impact in the market in 5 to 10 years. And lastly, coming back to your question about the impact in the value chain, that leads me to the conclusion that AI has huge impact already now all across the value chain. For example, in research development, utilizing AI to discover new molecules, utilizing things like AlphaFold to understand protein structures a lot faster, a lot better, to clinical trials, for example, designing them, identifying patients, doing protocols, up to in the market where AI solutions can really support patients or even generate hybrid drugs to accelerate and improve medication impact and efficacy. However, again, my point, it will just take time, and we have to have that patience.
Thank you. I think this is very, very valuable. I mean, it's good to see, perspectives both coming from different dimensions and directions, and sort of, also converging to sort of, more or less the same thinking. But let's also take a look at, for example, what are the enablers or requirements to foster a broader and faster AI adoption, right? Because I think with a faster adoption or without having a faster adoption, we can be sure about its hype or reality. It's one of the evidences to see. So I think, if you look at this from that perspective, obviously, there are a couple of things such as, the data availability, because you cannot do anything if you don't have data, or quality. So it's junk in, junk out type of sort of, process in place. Or also sort of, even if you have the data and build the best model, it's the risk appetite or tolerance or openness to innovation. And also sort of, basically, we look at it, and Chinchao gladly sort of, touched upon the regulation perspectives as well. So from that perspective, again, if you come back to the requirements or enablers to foster a broader and faster AI adoption, so this time, if I start with Philip, maybe from the other side of the table, what are your thoughts about it? Thank you.
Sure. I think I touched upon it a bit in my previous comment. So I think there's some things we just can't speed up or increase. However, on the commercial side, I see a lot of different levers. And a lot of importance for us to advocate for them, especially, of course, being on the regulatory side. Here we're talking about software as a medical device, EU AI Act, or GDPR in general. These things are super useful and necessary, no questions asked. But of course, they delimit the amount we can innovate. I've seen companies in the space specifically, even though they would have the technology, limiting it to go to non-SAMD solutions, just in order to be able to avoid all the regulatory things that come with it, in order to hit the market faster and prove that benefit that they have to prove in order to then go for SAMD, because otherwise they would never make it and actually go there, which to a certain degree of course makes sense. I'm a big advocate of MVPs and showing value fast in the market. But I think that is actually limiting our innovative capabilities, because we're looking too much at immediate returns instead of going the long way, which these regulations that are in the market actually require.
Yeah, actually, I kind of agree with that. I think that when we think about like the drivers for adoption, probably we need to think at least separate like in which part of the value chain we are speaking about. Like if we are talking about things like, again, all these small things that can help to increase productivity, I think that those can follow like a more like the tech path, let's say. But when we talk about things that either for commercial or for R&D that are touching more on what you are saying, right? Like that require like either like a specific quality to pass a specific quality bar, either some being a medical device or to qualify to be supporting like clinical research activities. And not only that, that also require like the evidence and the validation to support that. Then that's, I guess, a different game, right? And one of the reasons is that the level of investment to be able to arrive to that point is the time, as you mentioned, but also like the level of investment. And then when the level of investment, then it comes to, okay, how do we align the incentives to make sure that the return of investment is there in both cases, right? Like I think when we think on the commercial side or to bring solutions to the clinical practice, I would say that it's even harder because like the incentives today, like the market is extremely fragmented and the incentives are not aligned to adopt that kind of technologies today. I mean, there are like, and we all know, like there are like some specific frameworks today to start bringing this kind of technologies there. But still, like the level of investment that is needed is significant, and those channels today are still not well. In some cases, it could be like enough, but it is really hard and tough, to be honest. On the R&D side, maybe like the incentives are more clear, but again, the level of investment makes a significant barrier for adoption at the beginning.
So I think one of the key, and we have a great partner, Merck, on this panel, and we can discuss the use case we've had. We're a digital AI company, and we believe for a pharma company to be successful in adopting such solutions, they have to have great partners, and defining the right partnership is key. We see among our, whether partners that come to us or in the industry, we do see that pharma companies make the attempt of building technologies in-house. The reality is that they don't have the expertise. You may bring the resources, but you cannot compare your experience and your subject matter expertise with a company that has been in this industry for many years, or let's say to the Microsofts or Googles of the world. And that has to be accepted by pharma companies, that they need to identify the right partners in this path. And that comes to the point that Philip, you were mentioning. Yes, the time to market is key. So you have to work with companies and enablers that buy you the time, provide you with the right regulatory approvals that you require to roll out software as a medical device solutions. And that's where a partner comes into play. And in our partnership with Merck in the oncology space, we have managed to not only partner together, but see each other as one team. And when we first started, I think it was also early on for us in this particular sub-disease that we were working with Philip's team, we decided to, first of all, be very realistic on, let's say, the KPIs. And we both accepted that it will take time for both of us to observe the value and the return of investment. Now, with that mindset and with that visibility, we started rolling out the solution, building the MVP together as partners. And to date, I can say that we've managed to see that measurable outcome, whether it's that the patient adherence that we want to see or generating insights from the data that we're collecting. But going back to the adoption, so it's the partnership that needs to be identified. It's about having that mindset from both parties, whether it's the tech provider and also the pharma company or the hospital, to be in this game together. It's not about pointing fingers, it's about improving and also enhancing the way that we work together and the way that we want to achieve those efficiencies that we have in mind. And one thing that we have with our clients is that from early days, we try to sit down with them and try to understand what is the problem we're solving for. Because if you know the problem statement, you're not using the hype and you're not thinking about a fantasy of bringing a very high-tech AI solution that will revolutionize the patient journey. No, we want something practical, we want something that is measurable, and we want something that could be implemented in the hospital infrastructure that we're operating in. So that's also another key, meaning having that understanding and alignment with pharma partners on what are we expecting and what does success mean in this particular technology and solution. And I think the other enabler is having the right resources from a talent aspect. Of course, a tech company will certainly provide that, but it is also essential for that pharma company and for that hospital to upscale their skill sets. As we're introducing these solutions, we need to also train our employees, the people, the talents on the ground, and incentivize them to adopt these solutions. Because no matter how great a solution is, how user-friendly it is, if the people on the ground do not adopt it, it will be a waste of investment. So I'm going to keep it short, but we can definitely touch on it. But Philip, any comments?
Yeah,
Yes.
just one comment. Actually two comments. So first, to the collaboration piece, of course, couldn't agree more. And actually, the review we're talking about also in MIT, one thing they found was that externally developed solutions or co-developed solutions have a twice as high likelihood to be deployed in the market. Of course, we're not talking about any revenue or savings impact, but just being deployed. So just actually making it into the market, twice as high chance. So I couldn't agree more that bringing together the different talents and the different experiences is so important in this field. And then second point you made, which I also couldn't agree more to, is the part of innovating or developing AI solutions with patients and HCPs in mind, which is of course very obvious, but really not coming from how can we save money with this, but being very, very realistic if this actually fits into HCP and clinic workflows and actually is supporting patients. As a brief example, so that doesn't have anything to do with AI, but I know there was a company that developed self-dissolving screws for surgeries, which sounds great, right? You don't have to come again to the hospital to get them removed after your bone has healed again. So everybody, I think, would agree, great innovation. However, it never really made it in the market because HCPs lost money. They couldn't do the second surgery. And of course, because of that, they didn't promote it and they didn't use it, which sounds very bad, I agree, but the innovators just didn't think about the HCP workflow and their needs. They thought about patients' needs, which is fair, but really dealing in a very segmented market with a lot of different stakeholders, and all of them need to find a value in it, or else it will not succeed.
I think it's very great to listen to you. Very harmonic partnership. I think this is very great that you both guys are here to elaborate. Which party plays which kind of vital role to make that happen. And I think the question about enablement is really to see how the AI is really felt. For the on the street effect. For the patients, for the operations. And I think Philip, you touched down on multiple times on the speed, right? That you think. Things cannot be accelerated unlimited, but the question is why. When I working with both governments and big pharmaceutical company, and even I just mentioned our success about chronic diseases with working with China. What I also see the success, the teams and the internal organization felt was internally. And they told me, for example, before the project, Chen, before you came in, I never talked to my German colleagues, or how we have aligned with the headquarters, the global team. So I think this is also true when it's come to adoption enablement of AI tool, and that there's a great component of communication. I think Finance from Humas just showed, that her team and with Merck has demonstrated that how teamwork and mentality shift is key. And also when it's come to, the real value, I think, it's very good to understand the regulatory framework have to evolve with the technology advancement. And this is what we always have to bear in mind to move along with the government, move along with policymakers. But we are too easy to also sometimes blame regulations, also not related to healthcare directly, GDPR. Right, very sometimes frustrated. People always use this to kind of picture the EU. But on the other hand, when it's come to governance and to set a good example for the world, this is also the strength which is respected by other nations. For China, for example, China has strengthened its own regulation, privacy, etc., very heavily because of GDPR, because they see, wow, this is something maybe partially as North Star. Right. So similar, I think we are discussing right now the AI Act. Right. A similar thing. I think there's no question. I think when it's come to enablement, either or, which system is better. In China we have the speed. There's a centralized pilots. Have a huge data framework, and a lot of clinical trials already happening in China, also with help with AI. But I think this is also true to really see how can two work together. I think the great success I see, especially when it's come to real, implementation, real, return investment, real, subsidy of the government is to connect the parties. How European governments can learn from the other governments, how people can feel heard. And feel, because I just talked to some leaders, either they are from IT, AI adoption, ERP responsible person, or government affairs person. The more AI we're using, and you all raise your hand, the more important about personal relationship, right? This is ultimately what remains. And this is also the key success factor to have the strong enabler, advocated, and really to understand the interests of others.
Wow, such a lot of concept and a lot of points to be discussed. I'd like to elaborate a little bit on top of what Farnaz said about the partners and the partnership, because that is the key point from that point of view. But let me start also with let's say something an observation on this point. You can have a very good partner ecosystem. You can have a very good, let's say, set of partners, but it's also true that by looking at the enterprises, when you have these partners that maybe they build such beautiful models or beautiful tools that work in theory sometimes, because maybe they're not trained on a big amount of data. They are trained, let's say, on some test data. Then, of course, I mean, this is very, very, let's say it's not always the same from that point of view. But data at that point become a real enabler. So you can be the biggest pharma in the world and you can, let's say, attract partners. But if you don't provide to these partners the right amount of data, so you don't make data available, and I can say this from a platform provider perspective, of course, you don't make data available, you don't work on the data in order, let's say, to put this data work in the specific models, you will never get value out of those partnerships. Now, what is the point? The point is that if I look at the landscape, and we said it before also, it's very fragmented, and data especially are very fragmented, are very siloed, are basically everywhere in the companies. And also, most of the time, we are not looking at the right data. Let me make an example. I was working with a pharma company in the US, and we were discussing the introduction of artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence for the sales rep, so in the commercial, basically, So what do? How we do understand exactly the interaction point between the field rep and the healthcare professional? What are the insights that we can get from there? Okay, where do we have the data? Are the data in Viva? Partially. Are the data in IQVIA? Partially are there also. Are the data, let's say, on the Salesforce CRM? Yes, partially are there. But these are only operational data. We mix the interaction between the healthcare professional and the field and sales rep. Where are these data? So we ran a survey with them, and we discovered that these data were on WhatsApp. So, I mean, these data were not on any corporate database or any specific, let's say, system. These data were on WhatsApp because, I mean, most of the sales rep, they were basically chatting with the healthcare professional from that point of view. How do you get this data? That's the point, no? So you can build a partnership that are going, let's say, to speak with Meta in order to get the WhatsApp data, for example, or what is exact. So this is one of the most important points, no? How do we then foster the adoption also of tools that are close to what the people, the sales rep in this case, wants to use, for example? Because, I mean, people are always ahead of companies in the interaction with the digital tools, in the interaction, let's say, especially in the usage of the digital tools. So I would say data is one of the key enabler for the AI adoption. Without, let's say, that kind of right data landscape, it's basically sometimes even impossible, let's say, to put partnership or to put, let's say, your investment at scale. Let me say something more on this also in a couple of minutes. A lot of companies, especially in the startup space, in the biotech space, understood this point. And they started, let's say, to move from building the technology to building the service. So, Philip, you mentioned AlphaFold before, which is an incredible technology, of course, no? And DeepMind, Google DeepMind is there and developed the technology. But how do you put that technology at work in a real enterprise, let's say, environment? You get isomorphic labs in the end, which use that technology but build the molecule as a service in the end, in order, let's say, to really get value out of that. So, again, it's how do we enable, based on data, how we enable using the data that are already in years and years of clinical data, let's say in the enterprise data landscape, for example. But in order, let's say, to enable also AI, you need to go a little bit farther from that. And you need, let's say, also to understand which are the tools and the models that will really, let's say, bring some value out of that. So partnerships are key from that point of view. There are a lot of examples that we can make from that point of view. And last thing I want to say is we should stop to think to AI as a project, implementation project and something like that. AI is not a collection of developer in a basement that is working, let's say, on something, because, I mean, that is potentially, what AI is doing for them. We must think to AI as exactly when we launch any initiative in our companies, when we want to launch a new initiative, when you want, let's say, to start a new therapeutic area, let's say, if this is even possible from that point of view, what we do, we start, let's say, by understanding which are the capabilities that we have in-house, which are the capabilities that we need to buy from the market. We have an hiring plan. We want to attract, let's say, scientists. We want to attract people that are, of course, familiar, and good in those areas. Is exactly the same thing. This is, let's say, the selection framework for the agents. Agents will be exactly like humans. You will have a recruitment department for agents, exactly as you have today a recruitment agent and department for humans. And you will build on that in order, let's say, to launch the initiatives. Otherwise, the risk is to go always, let's say, not really getting the value, because, I mean, you are there on saying, hey, where is the KPI, where is the output, where is the outcome, etc. We shouldn't think about AI project. We should think about agent recruitment in the end, which is very similar to human recruitment, which is changing then, of course, a lot also the organization from that point of view.
Thank you. Obviously, we need much more time for this panel because we have, I think, 3 or 4 more questions prepared. And we are at the end of the time, 50 seconds, 55. We have still a second poll running, so I encourage everyone to participate because we'll see the difference a little bit between before and after, as Cham said. But with that, or while the poll is running, I want to really thank, first of all, my co-chair and co-organizer, Cham, but more so the panelists for really, I would say, very insightful and broad perspectives, really from their different viewpoints, industry can I say, consulting, tech, obviously, pharma. My personal perspective is that yes, AI is definitely here. You made the initial question, who is using ChatGPT, but obviously AI in pharma is much more, or AI in healthcare is much more than ChatGPT. Regulation is important, data is important. So I think we are really at the starting point of an exciting time. We are really living in exciting times. We can be part of that. We can shape it, all with our organizations in different roles. We do it with our companies. Yuma is doing it. Microsoft is doing it. Pharma is adapting it, hopefully as quickly as possible for the benefit of the patients. I think this is the most important thing. That's why we are in this industry. And with that, I would like to close the panel and maybe look for the last time on the results.
I think if we were able to change it by 30% positively, there's still hope. That's not hype, it's reality. So hopefully, and nothing negatively has changed. So
That's good.
I'm glad to see that we didn't break anything. Well, it's even going up, 36%. Yeah, exactly.
Any last question to any pressing questions to the panel? Otherwise, I would close the panel. Oh,
I will have to be strict. We
Yeah,
have a
please,
time
please,
for a
please,
very
please,
short
maybe
one.
be very strict.
Last one. Yeah.
Great panel, thank you very much. So I think it's a no-brainer that the productivity will be increased with AI, but my experience, pharma is using AI to maximize the value of their assets, so which is not always aligned with the patients. Shouldn't be a AI used by the patients in order to select first to get the right diagnosis and then select the right therapeutic. In the end, the patient doesn't care if the therapeutic comes from Merck, Roche, Sanofi, or whatever. So are the incentives right?
Well, I mean, fully agree with that, and I think that that's already happening. I think that both AI or any other health tech, I mean, at the end, like you want to create like assets that have an impact on patients. That's the end goal. And when you want to go and commercialize those assets, that, I mean, if you do something that doesn't make sense to the patient community, that also like their voice have more and more weight on that decision, I think is useless. And today we are using already technology to either on the R&D, for example, to make sure that you are able to recruit the right patients for the studies, because it's not always easy to identify those and to make sure that the population that you are targeting with a specific asset under study is the right one. So that kind of things are already happening. But also like then on the commercial side, to make sure that at the end you find the right patient or you are able to recommend the right treatment to the right patient. Just again, there is nothing like the big thing that fixes everything. We are talking about like case by case, but those things are already happening to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, just to quickly add to that, even for us, it's very important to gain patient feedback and input. And this is, again, to our partnership with Merck and other pharma companies. And whenever we build a technology and a solution, before we officially roll it out, we make sure that it's in the hands of a few patients and the KOLs. We gather their input and feedback to ensure that the adoption is smooth. So to your point, yes, there's a lot of input from pharma, from us based on our experience, but patients and KOLs are also involved early in the loop.
Brief,
I'm afraid that's-
very, very brief comment, because that is such a cool question. I'd say in my peer group, 80-85% have some form of digital tracker, smartwatch, or a Whoop, whatever. So you could say, in theory, in the future, do we even need HCPs, or do they become less and less important because the patient becomes more and more medical literate? I would say yes, in the sense that the patient becomes more medical literate. The question is, do we trust these machines enough? And to be honest, I don't know, TBD, but super cool question.